Yeah. So what do you think is a good way to start off with? What's different with these two?
So for array and array list, when you know that you have fixed size to store certain objects like strings or numbers, then arrays would be the best way to go because it's easier to retrieve information, is faster, and you cannot change the size of arrays unless you call a method for it. But for array lists, when you create array lists, you don't need to initialize a size. You can just create a new empty array list. And whenever you feel like you want to add more items into the list, then you just keep adding. This way, array list is taking a little longer to retrieve information because a list can be like hundreds objects inside the list. And for you to loop through, that would be like a long process. So depends on the situations, pick your list arrays or array lists.
Okay. So then those are pretty much the differences with arrays and array lists. Now, they actually do have a lot of things the same, so but done differently. So for example, if you wanted to access an element for an array list, it would be .get. And then for an array, you have to do something like myArray I. So these are the two differences between them. The syntax can be quite different. So myArray list. And so pretty much this notation right here with the brackets, it's something that you use for strictly arrays, and then something over here is for strictly array lists. So let me just say how to get an element. And this is pretty much kind of the same of how it goes when you're setting an element, right? So if you wanted to set an element, it would be something like this, and you would say set. And over here, you pretty much kind of use the same thing, except you set equal to a certain primitive value, or just a value in general, or even an object. But that's pretty much the point. You could just set it equal to something. Anyways, enough about that. Actually, I should just keep it there. Anyways, so Jan, do you think array lists can well, actually, wait. So can an array accomplish the task of an array list? So can arrays do everything array lists can do?
I would say yes for the most part.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. The difference between them is probably the size. And there's also one more thing is that a shortcut from yesterday, an array, like when you want to add, so let's say you have a number 2 at index 0, and you want to make that number 2 into 3. The shortcut is just to use the index with the brackets, and you increment on the right side.
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah. So so Yan was pretty much saying, if you wanted to update a certain value, then you could just say that, and it should do the trick. Yeah. So I think pretty much arrays can do everything that an array list can do, except grow. You have to do that part yourself. If you wanted to turn an array of size 5, so like an array of size 5 into an array of size 6, you can't really just do that out of nowhere. You'd have to create a new array. Then you'd have to copy all the elements of the smaller array, and then store that in the new array. But we're not going to go over that. At that point, you should have just used an array list. Unless, of course, that's what your homework says to do, right? But for the most part, they can do what each other can do. It's just one can grow, one cannot. So that's pretty much the way of how it goes. And there's also the syntax, of course. But you can find all of that in her lecture slides, so it should be fine. Okay. So, wait, did you want to say anything else, Yan, before we move on?
Before we move on from ArrayLists and arrays, I want to touch a little bit on the for loops and the traditional for loop and enhanced for loop. So can you tell me more about that, Mark?
Okay, so sure. I think it's better for me to show it by doing it. So just ignore the code that I started off with. I'm just going to comment it out for now. This will be for a later activity. So I'll just comment it out. All right, so first of all, we have three kinds. So you said for loops, while loops, and enhanced for loops?
Mm-hmm.
Okay, so the traditional for loop that we had is int I equals 0, I is less than something. So I guess let's just say 5, right? Actually, let me just say int size equals 5. Yeah, so less than size, and then I plus plus. Oops, fingers are dying today. Okay, anyways, and then your code here. So this is what a traditional for loop looks like. And the thing to note is we're basing our cases off of a number. So we're using a number here. So that means whenever we have something like for example, if we had a string, my string, and then we set it equal to, let's just set it equal to Apple. Yan likes to use Apple a lot. So then we would have something like, if we're processing through a string, then at that point, we don't even need this, actually. We could just say my string that size, or that length. Oops. Okay, anyways. I'm going to typo somewhere. Oh, right there. Okay. Anyways, the point is whenever we have to set a variable like a character, so the string letter equals my string dot substring I and I plus 1, we use this right here, like this I. We based our code revolving around this I. Now, how does that look like when we use an enhanced for loop? So it actually changes quite a lot. So for so actually, let's say we have an array list, right?
No, you can do it.
Oh,
you can do it.
Okay.
I think so. For every letter inside the string.
Okay. So string letter my string. You're saying like that?
Mm-hmm.
Okay. I wasn't sure. Okay. Let me see here.
Oh, never mind.
Okay. Yeah.
So you need a list, a collection.
Yeah. So
go ahead and create a list.
Okay. So it actually changes quite a bit when we use an array list. So let's say we have an array list. Oh, wait, I have to. Okay, wait, I already imported it. So, so I think it was array list of string. Was the L capitalized?
Mm-hmm.
Equals new array list. Okay. And then in that case, it would just be my array dot add. Okay. And then it would be my array dot size. So instead of processing through one character at a time, now we're processing through an array list. So my array dot get. So we're we're getting a whole word, a whole phrase. Yeah, I totally forgot about that. Anyways, so how does this look like when we use a for loop? So notice how for the traditional for loop, we use I, because our for loop revolves around I, and so we have to make our code revolve around that, right? So we use this notation to get the string, like I guess it's better to call it current string, right? So we go through one string at a time. In this case, there's only one string, which is apple, right? But if I said apple 2 and apple 3, then yeah, it would go from apple 1 to apple 2 to apple 3 one at a time. So that's how it would look like for a traditional for loop. But then for an enhanced for loop, it changes quite a lot. So how would it change, Yen? So let me just finish this part.
So you could just write my array.
Yeah, I'm just changing up some names here.
Okay.
But yeah, do you want to explain this part, Yen?
So for that one, you would write string, current string. So the differences between the traditional for loop and the second enhanced for loop would be, if you notice in the traditional for loop, you had to use the index and the method itself, .getI, right? So what that would mean is that get the string at this index I. That's how you read the for loop. But then for an enhanced for loop, you would read it like, for every string inside my array list. So that's the difference. The enhanced for loop already get the object for you, and that is the current string. But for the traditional for loop, you have to use get I in order to get the object and initialize it to a string, current string right here. So for a traditional for loop, you have to go the extra step. But the useful way to think about it is, if you're using the traditional for loop, you can updating the data within that for loop. But for enhanced for loop, it is useful and faster for array or array list, but the limitation is that you cannot updating the value. You can accessing the values of the array or array list.
All right. So yeah. But I think the biggest takeaway here, on top of what Yen says, so that what Yen says is one half, is the second half is having to change the notation here. So instead of saying that get I, then you already have the current string. So instead of saying like the first string, the second string, the third string, this one over here, this for loop is instead saying, okay, you're the current string. And then he points to the second one. He doesn't care that it's the second one that's based off of a number, but he's just saying, now you're the current string, and then you're the current string. And he keeps going, they keep going through each and every string and just keep calling that current string. And it just doesn't use this number at all. So whether you use one or the other, it actually quite depends on a lot on the context. I actually, personally myself, I use this most of the time, but you can do the same thing with this. But for the most part, a for loop is a for loop. It's just this notation, it's a lot easier to control because you can set the numbers yourself, right? But over here, it's a little bit more ambiguous, right? Because it depends on the size of your collection. Because this could have been an array list of something, right? Like let's say there's a class called something. It could have been an array list of something, and then you might have not known, and it can get pretty confusing. But it's also easier to read, right? So every single thing in that array, or array list, right? You call it current string. So I actually should have called this array list. Let me just add that right here. So did you want to add anything else, Yen?
Yeah. And also for the traditional for loop, you can start at any index value as long as it's not the size of the array list. So it can start at 1, it can start at 0, it can start at 2. But for the enhanced for loop, it always starts at index 0 to the end of the last element of the array list.
That is also true. So over here, you can change int I equals 0. And you can also change this to size -1, size -2, -3. But over here, it's always going to say from the beginning to the ending of that entire collection. This is easier to write most of the time because most of the time you just go from the beginning to the ending of that collection. But this is easier to like manipulate. So I think, is that everything?
I think so. We can
Okay.
move on to our activity.
All right, so let me just delete all this. It's all going to be in the video, so don't worry about it, guys. All right, so let me see. All right, so for those of you who don't have access to the slides out here, let me just share the link one last time. It's going to be in the Zoom chat, so you go ahead and click on it. And there's going to be a sample code over here that you're going to need for the not presentation, but the activity that we have. Okay, so again, feel free to try it yourself. I actually highly encourage that you try it yourself and then ask us questions along the way. But Yen and I are going to be doing it at our own pace, so try to stay with us. Okay, so I'm going to get rid of the comments now because this is the sample code that you're supposed to start with. Okay.
So, Mark, can you briefly explain to me what these code supposed to do before we move on to the methods itself?
Sure. Also, one thing, guys, I actually just gave you this part. I should have gave you the entire class, but that's my fault. You'd have to delete everything, just put in public static void main. But I'm pretty sure you guys probably know how to do that. Anyways, so we have a scanner right here, and the point is actually here. Let me just run it, and then I think the message will be clear as soon as we do it. So as of right now, when I run the code, it's going to ask us how many phrases do you want, and I'll say 3, and then I'm going to say first one, and then second one, and then third one, and it'll just print the 3 phrases that we have. So if I change this to 4, then it would ask for a 4th one, right? That's pretty much how the program works right now. And it does that by having an array and then storing all of the strings inside of an array list as you ask the question over and over. So the first thing is it asks how many phrases do you want? And then that's how many times it's going to repeat, right? It's going to take an integer, and that's how many times the loop is going to repeat. And then, of course, you need to scan for it. And then you need to do the prompt. And then you need to keep scanning for it. And then every time it happens, you have to add that string to your array list. So, and then in the end, it just prints the list of strings. So that's what it does for now. What we're going to try to do with this, however, is we're going to try to make a program that removes all the duplicate characters of each string inside an array list. So as an example, you're going to try to, whenever you see the word apple, right, it will turn apple into APLE because there was 2 P's, but you only get each character uniquely 1 time. And you apply this to every string in the array list. So basically, every time you start with a new word from the array list, you have to start fresh. And then you just have to collect all the unique characters from there on. Every time you start with the next word. By the way, and somebody in the chat says they're not able to open the link. Actually, here, I got it. So you can't open the link if you're not using your student account. Make sure you're using your student account email. Okay, so yeah, so we have the starter code, and we're going to try to accomplish that goal. So let's see here. How would a person start this first? So first, how does a student tell what they need to do this? Yen, where do you think their thought process should be when they see a problem like this?
Can you show the problem again?
Oh, okay, sure.
So the first thing, so first of all, you read the method names, because most of the time the method names tells you what to do, right? So here is a remove duplicates. And so for the duplicates, as always, when you want to update, when you want like something to return from an actual data, like a string or array list, you want to make sure that they can call this method many times, but the original list will always remain the same. So what I'm saying is this could be an accessor method, not a mutator method. Because if it's a mutator, the original list will be changed, but you don't want that in this case. So, but you want to test if your method is actually correct. So that would be make this program that will remove all the duplicated letters in each string inside ArrayList. So once you call this method, on the right side, it will be something list, RemoveDupes parenthesis list, and on the right side would be an ArrayList A or something like that to test if your method is actually right. Do you have anything more to add, Mark?
I'm trying to make sure I spelled this right. Yeah, that's pretty much the goal here. And yeah, I think you pretty much laid out everything clear, so I think we can start. There's a question in the chat, and they're saying, do I have to join the Zoom meeting with an SJSU email? I'll let you answer that question, Yen, as I write a couple things.
I think no, as long as you can access the Google form, which is, I think so, because the Google form requires you to be an SJSU student. So once you fill out a Google form, yeah. All right. So let's move on to the methods. Can you scroll down a little bit?
Mm-hmm. Did you mean on BlueJ?
Yeah, BlueJ.
Okay.
So first we start the method. So it will be public static ArrayList, and in this case, it will return an ArrayList of string. Because notice that when we initialize the ArrayList above, it is an ArrayList of strings. All right. And in order to test if our ArrayList have multiple duplicates letters inside each string, we want to take in the ArrayList of string inside a parenthesis. And why do we need to hoop string inside a diamond bracket? It is because what if someone enter a number, right? Then your ArrayList would be ruined because you only want strings inside of it.
So it compiles for now. I just put this as a dud. Don't mind that. So a lot of students might be confused once they see this word static. You don't have to know about that for now, but basically it just means you don't need to make a constructor and all that fancy stuff that class normally has. Just that's pretty much what it's doing, because we didn't make a constructor for this class. All we're doing is public static void main. This lets you be able to do that, but that's not object-oriented programming, so I don't recommend that you do that all the time. This is just for the practice of this activity. So, yeah. Anyways, did you want me to start off the first few steps again?
Yes, please.
Okay, sure. So, the first thing to notice here is we have to return a certain type of array list. Why? That's because we got to return a modified copy of the original list. So we're not trying to modify the original list and just leave it there like that. We're trying to return a copy of it and modify the copy itself. So that means we got to take the original list. That's what OG list stands for. And we got to return a list based on that original list. So it sounds kind of confusing for now, but it'll make sense as we write it. So first of all, I need to create the new array list that we need to generate. So the new array list also has to be of type string, because how do you go from a string to a number when you're transferring elements from one list to the other? So you can't really do that. That doesn't really make sense. So I'm going to say new array list. Yeah, sure, let's go with that. And then new array list. So this is just a notation for creating an array list. Okay. So now we have to look at the original list. So think of it like this. From the original list over here, in this case, we would have list of strings, right? We'd pass that original list into this method right here, into this argument right here, and that's what original list is. So we can assume that original list probably, well, yeah, we'll make code that makes sure it runs even if it's empty, but we can assume that that's the list that we're gonna mess with, right? So we can just process through it. So similar to the how we did it before, where we had an enhanced for loop, we can go through each element at a time and look at each string in that list. So we can use string, and then let's just call it S, just string S for short. Or here, how about current S? And then we would have to process it through the original list. Okay, so this means we're going through each current string in the original list from beginning to ending. So that means inside here, okay, so here, let me write comments along the way actually. So then this means go through each string of the original list. Then over here, what would our logical step be, like our approach? Like not in code wise, but what is ideal that we should do here again? Like idea wise.
So the method is asking you to remove the duplicates. Right now, you have the empty array list, which you will add elements in later that satisfy the condition, right? And then you add it back to the array list. But before that, you can add that modified string into the new array list that you're creating in here. You need to make sure that you loop through every string inside the list. And for every time that you loop through each string, you want to make sure that the string satisfies the condition that you want. So you have to initialize an empty string for each string inside the array list. So if, let's say apple, right? So in original, when you take it out originally, is apple with 2 P's. And then after you loop through, it passed the condition now with only 1 P, then you would replace that into that new string and then you take that new string and add it into the list, which is my new array list in this case.
Okay. So pretty much this for loop right here is saying, let's go through each string. Then inside here, we gotta remove the duplicates in that string. But does it really make sense to try to remove a particular substring from a string? Does that sound easy, Yen? Or is it just better to just build a new one?
I think it's better to build a new one because, take it back, string is an accessory class, so you always want your original string or original data of ArrayList to be the same. You don't want to modify it, but what you want to do is have a method or a certain kind of method to retrieve that information that you want and store that into a new place. So that is what we want right now. And so we will start with creating an empty string.
So yeah, it's a lot harder to look at Apple and say remove P than to start off with an empty string, like for example here. So I'm looking at over here the original word, right? And I'm saying, okay, I'm looking at A. Okay, I'm gonna add A because it's not already there. What about P? It's not already there, so I'll add that as well. How about the second P? It's already there, so I'm just gonna skip that. How about L? Okay, I'm gonna add that there. And I'm gonna add E because it's not there. So the goal is to add every single character that's not already in the resulting string, right? So it's easier to just build it from an empty string than to go through with it and try to remove everything and keep track of the copies yourself. So new string, let's go with that. So now I have the new string and it starts off empty, and I have to build that up based on the current string, right? So in this case, we're using current string. So then I would have to do a for loop, right? And inside that for loop, the goal is build the empty string so that it doesn't have duplicates of original string. In this case, it's actually current s. So would this better be an array, not an array, sorry. Would this be a for loop that's enhanced or traditional, Yen? What's a good idea here?
So in this case, as you guys saw before, you cannot use enhanced for loop with an object. It has to be a collection. So in this case, you would have to use traditional for loop. And also it is better to use with the traditional for loop because for every time you want to index something, I is already there for you.
All right, so I'm going to use the traditional for loop. So I'm going to go through the string from index 0 to the end of the string. So that means the current string right here, which we already have, right? Because we don't need to say get I. We have the current string, dot length, and I++. So now we have to build the empty string so that we only add the letters that are not already there. So what kind of method sounds really useful in the string class that we can use, Yen? I'm going to write something, but you can go ahead.
I would say contains is the best one to use too. So with the contains method, what it does is it will compare one string to another. So if this current string does not contain this single letter or this string, then you add that in to the first string. So what you can say is if new string does not contain current letter, current L, then do something.
So then, now we have to think about what's that something here. So what this is saying is if the string, or I mean, if the letter isn't already present, then we have to add in new unique letter. So basically, what we're saying here is like just like how in the example before, we look at Apple and we look for A. Okay, so the first thing is we start with A. We look for A. Is it already there? No. Okay, good. Is P already there? No. Okay, good. Is P already there? Yes. All right, let's skip it. And then L and E. So that's what contains is doing. So it's saying if at the original string right here, sorry, new string, not contain. So if the string that you're currently building right here doesn't already have the letter that you're looking at from here at the original string, then we have to add in the new unique letter. So I think it's dot contains. And then I'm missing
a parenthesis.
Yeah, there you go. Okay.
Yeah, so now you would add, so let's say with Apple, when you compare an empty string to letter A, and you said, does this empty string contain A? No, not yet. There's nothing inside the empty string yet. So A would pass, and so you would add that A into the new string.
Goodness. All right. So if we have confirmed that that letter doesn't already exist in the resulting string, then we can add it to the resulting string. So in this case, it's the new string right here, right? So new string plus equals current L. So that's how it would look. And I'm trying to check answers real quick just to make sure. Yeah. Anyways, yeah, it looks good. So somebody in the chat is saying new string. Okay, so they're saying, can I just do this instead? Can I just take this and plug it in here? Can I just do that instead? Then I can do that. Yeah, that is most definitely true. So sorry, I had to pause for a moment because I was thinking, because it's starting to get a little bit complex. But yeah, so we're using current L instead of just directly putting it there. But it's equivalent to do it this way. Okay, so I'm gonna keep going. Yen, do you think we need to explain that a little bit more? Because I'm not sure.
So the way that Mar is doing right now with new string plus equal new current letter, that is the shortcut way to say that new string equal new string plus current letter. So either way, if you use the longer way or the short way, this like this, it would do the same task. So
Oh,
it's
okay.
up to your preference.
Oh, okay. Sorry, I misread the question. That's why I was so confused, actually. So they were asking if it was like this, and then you had new string, and then plus current L. And while you're at it, it's not even just using current L. It's just literally plugging this in, and so it's like that. Yeah, you can do that and just do it all in one line, but I like to have clarity in my code for my case, right? I write the way I want, but you can write the way you want. But I'll let you know that that is exactly the same logical equivalence. So it's a stylistic type of thing.
All right.
Okay.
So now that we filter out all the duplicate letters, we can now have the word that we want. And that, so that word is complete, right? Now you want to add that word into the empty array list that you have in the beginning of this method. So it will be just one simple line of code, which is new array list dot add new string.
So new array list dot add new string. Whew, that was easy, right, guys? That was really easy. Okay.
So let's say that we found all the filter words. We add all of them in the new empty array list. Now, one last thing we have to do with assessor method is return. So notice that the return type is array list of string. So you want to return something that has a data type, right? So that data type here that we have in the beginning is new array list.
So the type over here matches, and we should be allowed to say return new array list.
All right.
And that should compile. So let's run through this code quickly in our head one last time, just to make sure everything's working. So we make a new empty array list, so we can return a modified copy. Then for each element, or for each string in that array list, we have to remove, well, not remove, but generate a new string that is based off of the original array list string, and add only the unique copies. So we only add the unique copies right here. And then once we're done adding the unique copies of each character, right, then we add all the unique characters to this new array list that we have. And then we return that new array list. So it can get really confusing. But actually, we can actually turn this into one last one, just if you really wanted to. So if I wanted to make this part right here, this sounds like this could have been its own method, actually. So I could have said public static string. So this would return a string. Then I can put all this stuff into this method and just say like my method, right? And then just put it like that, and that would make more sense. But we'll do that at the end if there's time. I don't want to.
I have a question.
Yeah.
So what if my array list is empty?
So what if the array list is empty? Okay. So in this case, what if the original list is empty? Is that your question?
Yes.
Okay. So actually, what we end up doing is we generate this new list, right? And then we go through this for loop based on the original list. This for loop should automatically detect that the array list is empty and not run a single line of code inside of here at all. It should compile, I think. And then
Let's try it.
Yeah.
Let's run the code.
Okay, I feel like I'm wrong, but let's try it. And we have this new array list that's still empty, and then we return an empty array list. Let's see if I'm correct. I hope I am. Okay.
Well, you had to call that in the main method yet.
Did I not do it?
No.
Oh,
no.
wait, you're right. Oh, that's funny. Okay. So now we actually have to call this method inside the main method. We created the method, but we need to call it, right? So in this case, our original list would have been this right here, list of strings. So list of strings dot return without dupes. Wait, what am I doing? It should, okay, sorry. It should be, I'm off today. Oh my gosh. Okay. All right. I am so out of it. All right. There you go.
You have to do system.out too.
Yeah. And then we need to use system.out.println. Yes. I am going crazy. All right. List of strings. There you go. Okay. So now it should be fine. Okay. Let's pray that our code works. Okay. All right. So we wanted to have nothing. Okay. Well, it just pretty much prints nothing. And yeah, I mean, that's pretty much our expected result. Now let's test the code with one thing. Okay. So let's say 1, and we put in apple. It returns a single element, but still inside array. You notice that there's the bracket notation. It's still inside of a list, and there's no second p. Okay, so then let's try it with 2. Okay, let's say apple, and then let's say Mississippi. So MIS, and then the next unique thing would be P. Okay, now let's try it with 3, and then by then we could probably believe that it works. Okay, so apple, Mississippi. Well, actually, let's try something else. Let's say Halloween, right? That's close by. And then Thanksgiving. So notice there's no 2 L's, there's no 2 E's. Apple still works. Thanksgiving, everything starts to repeat over here. So it looks like it works. Yeah, it works great. Even if the array array list is empty. Because again, when you have an empty array list, we generate a new empty array list as well. So they line up, and none of this code executes if the original list is empty. So it works just fine. And again, guys, this is kind of a lot going on. So if there's a lot of crazy things and you don't know what's going on, feel free to ask in chat. I'm just reminding you. Okay, so.
But there's one thing though. If you use traditional for loop outside instead of enhanced for loop, then you would have to use that if condition to check if the list is actually empty though. Or else it wouldn't work. Here, it checks for you already with the enhanced for loop because you have to have something in the collection for it to retrieve the actual items. But with the traditional for loop, you start with I, and I mean you start at 0 and then 1 and 2. That is like assume that you have something in order for you to call the methods to get out the items inside the list. So be careful with that.
All right. So we have 5 minutes left. So I think we can put that to Q&A. Yeah. So, well, I mean, did we miss anything yet? Do you think?
For this method, RemoveDupes, you can easily convert that array list into arrays if you want. And I would recommend that you change it a little bit. Instead of using, the only thing that you really need to change is the data type, the way that you initialize the array list, and returning them. And that's all you really need. It's really short and really easy to convert this into to array. But one thing that you have to look for is how you would initialize the empty array, because now you have to take care of the size.
Okay. So, did you want to cover anything else, Jen?
I think that is it.
Mm-hmm. Okay. So for the last 4 minutes, if anybody has, so I'll give it about 20 seconds for anybody to throw in a question, and we'll answer it to the best of our ability. But if not, I'll actually go ahead and try creating that second method, like how I said earlier. And here's the thing, I'm saying try because I'm improvising. I only just thought of it right now, so we'll see how it goes. All right, so I'll give it a bit. Okay, it doesn't really look like anybody has a question, so I'll go ahead and hopefully not mess up. Okay, so we can create a new method, and we're going to call it remove duplicates. So I'm going to call it public static, and it's going to return a string, and we'll call it remove duplicates. So I'm doing this on the fly, guys. So just saying that one last time. All right. So string to remove duplicates from. It's a really long name, but I'm just gonna go with it. You can name it something else. Okay. So we have this method, and it's basically going to return this string copy. In that case, what happens here is we could just kind of paste this like this and just put it in here. Control-Shift-I. So we generate a new string. Then we have to say, instead of this, we'd have to use it from the string to remove duplicates from, because that's kind of what we're supposed to do. So anything that says current S, we remove it with this, and we use this instead. Now, in here, well, actually, I need to return something, right? So return new string. There we go. So hopefully that works. So it would be remove duplicates, and then it would be current S.
I will put that inside the add.
Yeah, so it would actually be right here. But for clarity, I would just say new string equals that, and then just add the new string. So this is a good way of programming, I think, because you you separate it into parts, right? Like, okay, so this part does the actual removing, and then this part adds it to the array list. So that's a good way of thinking of how to code things. It still does the same thing, but I think this is easier to read. I think. I think that's just my opinion, but that's how I would approach it. Let's see if it works. I hope it works. So we have, say, 3, Apple, Mississippi. And Halloween. Yeah, seems to work. And I'm glad my improv worked.